From the 1950s into the 1970s, highways built in U.S. cities profoundly wounded Black communities. Many of these thoroughfares were a part of the federally funded system of highways that went through Black communities, displacing thriving Black businesses and homes. Now, a federal grant will rectify what the construction of one of the shortest signed interstates, Detroit's I-375, did to Black neighborhoods like Black Bottom and Paradise Valley 60 years ago. Today, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg announced a $1 million program named Resurrecting Communities for the city of Detroit for its long-awaited plan to destroy the depressed freeway. Buttigieg says to fix a problem, we have to face and accept what caused it.
Sometimes fixing the damn roads means facing the repercussions of how the roads were originally built, who was included in that process and who was not, who was empowered and who was displaced. And when a generations-old piece of infrastructure comes to the end of its useful life, it requires us to decide in our time whether we're just going to put things back exactly as they were or whether we're going to build back better. And we know that some of the planners and politicians behind decisions in the past built roads like this one through the heart of vibrant, populated communities, sometimes even in an effort to reinforce segregation, sometimes simply because the people who lived there did not have the power to resist and force change. Here in Detroit, when I-375 was built in 1964, they literally bulldozed the neighborhoods of Black Bottom and Paradise Valley, displacing so many, mostly Black Detroiters. And now this freeway, generation later, serves to divide communities, primarily communities of color and low-income communities, from the central business district, the recreational areas, and other great assets downtown. And the freeway design is actually contributing to worse congestion and more traffic crashes on roads nearby. The purpose of transportation is to connect. But we have seen examples in many communities, including here, where an infrastructure decision serves to divide. And we raise this issue not to wallow in it, but to challenge ourselves to do something about it. And now we are putting our money where our mouth is. Governor Whitmer, Mayor Duggan, local advocates, the congressional delegation have supported the application for federal grant funding to fix this, and then did exactly what good advocates should do, which is kept pounding on the door, explaining the difference that this would make in the community, and making sure that this got every full and fair consideration in the process. And the result of that is that today I'm delighted to officially announce that the Department of Transportation is awarding $100 million to transform I-375 to reunite this part of Detroit to a connected, thriving community. This is a very big deal, a long time in the making, and it's going to mean that residents can move more quickly, more easily get between their neighborhoods and opportunities, more safely walk, bike, and drive in their city.
The highway removal could begin as soon as 2025, 2 years earlier than expected, with construction finished by 2028. All right, let's go to the panel. I have so many historians and professors on this one, so I'm going to say any, mini, miny. Michael, you go first with your reaction to this announcement, and just put it in historic context for us in terms of what kind of damage was done to Black communities under the pretext of expanding infrastructure.
Well, you know, Secretary Buttigieg was here in Detroit today. President Joe Biden was here in Detroit at the North American Auto Show yesterday. I live about 4 blocks from I-375. I live in the area that was Black Bottom in an adjacent community, which was the entertainment and business district, was called Paradise Valley. And I-375 comes through in 1964 and is part of the U.S. Interstate Highway Acts of 1952 and 1956 that drive about 41,000 miles of U.S. interstate highways all across the country. They run through about 1,600 African-American communities, wiping out homes, wiping out businesses. They're going to displace about 475,000 homes nationwide, which is about 1 million people. Here in Detroit, when you had the 1967 rebellion at 12th and Claremont, which is renamed, 12th Street was renamed Rosa Parks Boulevard, a lot of those African Americans that were there were originally in Black Bottom and got displaced from Black Bottom, then go into the 12th and Claremont area. So when the rebellion jumps off, they were already upset. But these expressways, this was all part post-World War II, and you have the deindustrialization of the inner cities taking place as the suburbs are being built. White people are getting homes built, a lot of them getting homes built financed by the GI Bill, getting low interest loans on homes, and a lot of African American World War II veterans couldn't take advantage of those benefits that they earned. And then they're taking the infrastructure from the inner city, the factories and things like this, moving them out to the suburbs, okay? And then they're running the expressways from the downtown business district out to the newly formed suburbs, wiping out African-American communities. And lastly, Buffalo, New York, where the top supermarket is, okay? That area, that African-American area, was an area that was harmed by expressways running through there as well. So this is all part of the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill that only 19 Republicans in the Senate voted for and only 14 Republicans in the House voted for. So this is an example of how elections have consequences. And I'm neither Democrat nor Republican, but sure as hell, I'm not stupid. And the Democrats are really the only ones who are talking about repairing this damage. Republicans are silent on this, and many of them don't want to even acknowledge that the damage has happened in the first place.
Ooh, class is in session. I want to stay with you just a little bit longer, though, since you are in the area. What does this mean for residents now? I mean, is this a priority for them? Is this something that you think moves the needle with people really connecting the dots about how it matters? Like you said, elections have consequences. And for too long, a lot of our communities have been left behind when it comes to these kind of packages and these kind of large initiatives. The trillions of dollars are being spent. So what do you think what does this mean to residents now? Not just you, but like the people that you're talking to.
I think for African Americans who are older, like my parents, that generation, I mean, my parents were born when Franklin Roosevelt was president. Okay, so for people who remember what was here in Detroit, it's going to be huge. Now, it's not going to be the same. WXYZ Channel 7 today has a story dealing with this. One of my friends, fellow historian Ken Coleman, is interviewed in the story, and he says it's not going to be the cultural mecca like it was, but it's going to be a boulevard. Is going to help the community. For younger people who don't really have any knowledge of that, this is something that has to be explained to them and understand how policies impact every aspect of your life. Okay. But for people like in their 60s, 70s, 80s who remember what was there, I think this is going to be something really important.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Dr. Carr, you are obviously a beacon of knowledge for connecting those dots for your students. How can you help bridge that gap? How can we help communicate? There was a panel, and I don't like MSNBC, I don't pay attention to them, but a panel of younger voters who are just completely disengaged and have no concept of what kind of impact their elected officials has. And this is a very tangible example. So what would you, how do you help bridge that gap? What do you suggest like the Democrats do to help really hammer that message home?
Well, I think the first thing we have to do is step back and ask ourselves, why now? Now, we know that this money, as Mike says, as he said, Mike wouldn't be here if it were the white nationalists in power. But as Ida Wells said, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. This is not a victory. This is a step toward a potential victory. What do I mean by that? You read a book like Sam Yett, a journalist from a generation ago. Sam Yett wrote a book back in the early 70s called The Choice, the issue of Black survival in America. And he was one of many who was documenting how these highways were placed. I'm from Nashville. They ran 65 through the Black community in Nashville. They wanted to run a highway through Washington, D.C., but they couldn't get the muscle through the local politicians. Every city where there's a black community, major city has had a highway run through it. So you ask yourself, why do you want to get rid of this highway now? Well, it's quite simple. 3 words. They're coming back. So, bike lanes and boulevards, this is not for the black people. So please understand. Please understand. And Mike, you know this better than anybody. They have bought up downtown Detroit. You could buy a house for $1 in Detroit 20 years ago. Now the thing is white hot. Market. What's that boy that ran LeBron James out of Cleveland, Dan Gilbert, whatever. The guys done bought up everything. So let's take the highway out. And this is not repair. You're preparing it for the pilgrims. This is the history of gentrification. So what I would tell young people is, now that they've gotten the highway out of the way, fight like hell. Why? Because now the property values goes up. So Mike, your parents and all the old people, they ain't gonna be able to stay there for the property taxes. Here come the pilgrims, the single parents, the bike riders, the baby strollers. And it looks like, well, black people should have gotten their act together. This is not a victory, y'all. This is just one more step. And finally, I'll end with this, since the Queen of England is dead. I'm reminded of something that Eric Williams said, the first Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. He said, the British are always talking about they abolished slavery. He said, sometimes I think they started slavery so they could run around the world and give themselves credit for abolishing it. You don't get no credit for taking the highway out, Pete. Now that you take the highway out, you'll get credit if black people can buy homes, run businesses in that neighborhood. Are you preparing it for the people who look like you, who going to come in with their babies and say, hey, we're Detroiters, while poor black people are pushed even farther out in the suburbs?
Well, that's not what I was expecting. But I should have seen that one coming. But, we have Secretary Marshall Fudge as HUD. So maybe, you put Secretary Fudge together. I still see
it's still homes, Detroit Land Bank. You don't have to get homes with a mortgage.
Yeah.
You can go to the Detroit Land Bank to get homes, things like that. And there are land banks like that in different cities. So, I know Bank of America is going to do 0% down, all that. I mean, if you want a 15-year, 30-year mortgage, you could do that. But there's other ways to get homes that are cheaper.
No, I agree. That's what I would tell young people. Fight like hell. That's what I meant. Right. This is not a victory unless you make it a victory. That's really what I was saying. And that's what it's going to take.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, don't burn me at the stake, but I watch Bargain Block, which is technically it's kind of a gentrification show in Detroit, and they're buying up homes for $1,000, $10,000.
Yeah.
So yeah, get in that housing market. Dr. Nichols, I saw you nodding along this time with Dr. Carr. So what's your take on this story?
Yeah, see, I'm right back to agreeing with Dr. Carr.
It's hard to keep disagreeing with him. He always brings you back.
And it's funny, I was gonna use the analogy of sticking a knife 6 inches in my back, and then you pull it out 3, and then say, hey, that's progress. So I actually 100% agree with them. I gotta say, I also agree with the idea that you have to make people aware of their options in order to fight. People say fight like hell, but don't give you a roadmap on how to fight. I don't know, to be honest, I don't know what a land bank is. I was intrigued by that. I'm like, what is a land bank? I'm thinking you have to go to Wells Fargo or one of these other banks that discriminates and, and ends up paying out, pocket change to them, but $10 million because they discriminate against black people. So I would like to know some of these options for black people to keep their homes, to keep elderly black people in their homes, to give young black people who are now renting an opportunity to own it in the communities that they come from and that they're raised in. I think that's really important. I will say there's another element of this that we haven't discussed, and that is when you talk about what happened with the building of a lot of these highways and freeways, not only did they displace black people, but the black communities that remained were suffering from noise pollution, air pollution, and other things that actually harmed them and shortened their lifespan. Yeah. So I think that and made it an undesirable place to live. And, I think about, the things that have happened in Miami and the way that, you have Overtown and the highways that surround it and make, those black communities are sometimes more vulnerable to flooding and other things that that happen in that part of the country.
Yeah.
So I think that, again, if they're going to start rebuilding these communities, they have to give Black people the options or the resources to stay in those communities and to plant their flag, which is ownership. And I'm all about home ownership. You know what I mean? That is the biggest asset most of us will ever have an opportunity to own in our lives. You know, I want to own a jet, but it hasn't happened yet. So my home is what I own. And I want every Black person, hardworking Black person, to have an opportunity to own a home, particularly in the communities where we've been for a long time.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And I mean, I appreciate what Michael said about the land bank, but I also appreciate what you said about the programs that are out there. You know, I think it was last week, I did a video kind of debunking this whole conspiracy that Bank of America was trying to trick Black homeowners into mortgages, which, by the way, a zero down mortgage and zero closing cost mortgage, that's pretty good, especially if they're not, you know, jacking up the interest rate beyond the standard market rate. But sometimes we have a little bit of suspicion towards programs that are actually meant to help us. So we do have some bridging of the gap to do to, you know, try to help Black folks understand what's out there and take advantage of it before somebody else does. Because we know that there aren't programs where you can explicitly say only Black people benefit from this, only Black people are eligible for this. So if we don't get it, somebody else is gonna get it. Michael, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I was just going to say, be careful with that zero down stuff, because a lot of times that's balloon rate and it's going to hurt you in the long run. So I'm not saying that that's the case with Bank of America and the program that they've created, but we know in 2008, you know, that was part of the issue was, zero money down. People bought more house than maybe they could afford. And then those rates all of a sudden exploded. And a lot of Black people, particularly around in Prince George's County, ended up getting foreclosed upon.
Yeah.
So I'd say if you have the opportunity, put 20% down. You know, save your coins, put as much money as you can down, so that you can have a lower mortgage rate. Okay,
now I'm gonna have to argue with you on that. Because I say absolutely do not put 20% down unless you have to. Because it's a very competitive mortgage market. I mean, there are so many loan options. I'm on my third house now. I don't own 3 at one time, but I have purchased 3 different homes over the course of my lifetime, and I've never put down more than 5%. So, I mean, the devil is in the details, which is you have to evaluate the program. Adjustable rate mortgages probably aren't the way to go. Especially, you know, you can always refinance later. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to get an adjustable rate mortgage. But this is not going to turn into a finance class. But let me just say this.
That's important.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I just have an MBA. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. But, you know.
It's important. Y'all glad y'all having this conversation, because land banks are one thing. It's very important. But let's be very clear. Mm-hmm. It's about finance. This is about banks. This is about, okay, I qualify for this, but will they give you the loan? We've seen this show before.
Yeah.
Black people are going to get run out of Detroit unless we organize and do something different.
And so
this is very important what you're saying.
And to be fair, what you're saying, Dr. Nichols, is accurate in some cases. If you have a lower down payment, you do have a higher interest rate. But in more recent years, it's not significantly higher. So you just have to do the math and determine, is it something that I can buy down? I can use points to buy down my interest rate, which is less than 20% down. So it's all about what works for you. Now, if you're the kind of person that it just burns a hole in your pocket, and you know, like, if I don't put this money down, it's gonna be gone at the casino or gone at the mall, go ahead and put 20% down. Go ahead and get a lower monthly payment. But if you're the kind of person that's gonna invest in like an index fund or something else, or you might wanna do renovations on your home, you don't wanna finance that, yada, yada, yada. Long story short, talk to your realtor, or maybe we'll have this conversation on another day. But thank you, fellas, for your comments on that.
All right, folks, back to that RolandMartinUnfiltered video in just one moment.
Can you believe the nerve of these Republicans? They only want to block progress for our community. They talk about cutting Medicare and Social Security. They played politics with veterans' health care. They voted against the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act and funding for our HBCUs, and against lowering prescription drug costs for our seniors. These Republicans keep trying hard to stand in the way, but President Biden, Vice President Harris, and Democrats won't let them. They are delivering for us. The Democratic National Committee is responsible for the content of this advertising.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RMUnfiltered. PayPal is RMartinUnfiltered. Venmo is RMUnfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.